My name is Mr. MegaManFan, and I am not what you would call an influencer. I did not get an Analogue Pocket ahead of time. I'm not mad about that because I still managed to get a pre-order and I got notification that it was shipping this week. So when those review embargoes lifted and every big YouTube channel put up their review of the Pocket, I was like, that's okay. I don't have fear of missing out. I know I've still got one coming. And if you weren't part of that first batch of pre-orders and you have to wait for fulfillment in 2022 or 2023, I'm sorry. I know that sucks. Global parts shortages suck, and trying to get things that are scarce in quantity sucks. But Analogue products, even though they can take a while to get and can be hard to get, they are worth it when you get them. I have never had one that I didn't like, and I suspect I will like the Analogue Pocket as well. But just to reiterate, I'm not an influencer. I did not get this in the mail from Analogue. I paid for everything you see in this video myself, so if I hate it, I'm going to say so, and if I like it, I'm going to say so. These opinions are entirely my own, with no editorial oversight from Analogue in any way. Now, one thing I have noticed from people who've done their own Analogue Pocket reviews on their channels is some people are having issues with the dock. It doesn't seem to want to sync up with their Analogue Pocket. So to that end, before I use my dock, I will update the firmware on the Pocket and on the dock. Both have had firmware releases in the last few days since the units started shipping out, and they're very easy to find. Go to any search engine you like, DuckDuckGo, Google, etc., and type in Analogue Pocket Firmware Update. It will take you directly to Analogue's website where you can download said updates. They are really easy to install. For the Pocket, you put it in the root directory of a clean micro SD card. I formatted one fresh for the purpose. It might work even if you don't. I'm not saying you have to, but that's what they recommend. So I went ahead and used one that was completely blank except for the firmware update. And I put the file in the update in the root directory. Then you put the micro SD card in the slot on the right hand side of your Pocket. Make sure it's not on. If you were using it before you did the update, power it down completely. You do that by holding the button for several seconds to turn it on or turn it off. So don't have a game in there, don't have it turned on, make sure it's completely off, put the micro SD card in there, and then power it on. It'll show you that it's updating, it'll put a progress bar on the screen, and then it will automatically reboot itself when it's done. The dock does not automatically reboot itself, but here's a pro tip. If you want to make sure that it is updating, plug in the HDMI cord first and hook it up to your TV and turn the TV on. Make sure you've got the correct input selected. Then use a USB-A thumb drive. You've got 100 of them around, I'm sure. My wife had one that she got free from a bank as a giveaway. So I put the update from Analogue's website for the dock on that thumb drive because there were no other files on it, but format it if you want to be safe. FAT32 in both cases, if I didn't already say that. So, once you put the thumb drive into either the USB port on the left or the right side of the dock, plug in the power. And if you've already got it hooked up via HDMI to your TV, you will see a status update bar on the screen with your TV turned on, just like you will see on the screen of the Analogue Pocket when you do that update. And it'll power itself down once the update is complete. Then when you dock it, everything will be golden. But you'll see that soon enough in my video. So as you can see, here's everything that came with the dock. And now I will unbox the Analogue Pocket. I know some people were complaining that the Pocket does not come with a charge brick, but if you bought the dock, you got a charge brick and an HDMI cord and a USB-C cord, which is kind of ironic because the Pocket itself also comes with a USB-C cord and no brick. But if you have the dock, then that's not going to be a problem. And even if you don't have the dock, surely you have a power brick for a cell phone that you can plug it into to charge. And if not, then you can plug it into a MacBook, because those have USB-C these days. And if not, just buy a power brick. I mean, it's the least of my concerns at this point. I'm sure you can figure something out. But for me, the fact that the Pocket didn't come with a power brick was not a gripe since the dock came with one of its own. I gotta say, there's some good heft to the weight of both the Pocket and the dock, so either they used really solid components or they added extra weight to it to make it feel more premium, which I'm not complaining about in either case, because when you spend $200 for a handheld, you probably want it to feel premium, right? I know I do, and it does have that feel. Everything about this has that feel though. The box itself, the little envelope inside with the quick start guide, the whole presentation has a really impressive product quality. The kind of thing that you would expect from a major brand like Nintendo or Sony is present in Analogue. Nothing about what they do seems or feels cheap. Even the cords that they bundle in with these systems have the Analogue logo on them, which is probably unnecessary, but it's a nice touch. As you can see, the one for the Pocket is exactly the same one as the one that comes with the dock. They both have the same cord length and they both have the same logos on each end, and they're both USB-C. So, like I said, if you don't have the dock, just find something you can plug this USB-C into to charge your Pocket. You'll know that it's charging by the little LED light on the bottom side next to the right of the plug. It comes with a little bit of charge to begin with, but not a full charge, and that's typical for these products when they ship out. They don't send them fully charged. You charge them up all the way once you get them. So next step here is to remove this screen protector film. I did order the official tempered glass screen protector when they opened the newest round of pre-orders, so I don't know when that'll ship, but I'm willing to use it in the meantime without one because they call this screen Gorilla Glass. It's supposed to be really high quality stuff, hard to break, hard to scratch. I want to put a protector on it eventually, but I'm not freaking out that I don't have one in the meantime. The same goes for the plastic protective hard case that they sell. I ordered one of those. Don't have it yet, but I will use it once I do. And the Game Gear adapter is the last thing I got during the latest round of pre-orders. So if those don't ship until the new Pockets ship, then I'm in the same boat as the rest of you when it comes to getting all of my accessories. This is what you'll see when you boot it up for the first time, which I did just to make sure it was working before I installed the firmware. I mean, spent $200 on this thing, right? You might as well at least turn it on and make sure it works. But I didn't dock it until I updated the firmware on both. Yes, there is an end user license agreement. Yes, it is really long. And yes, I agreed to it without really reading it in full. I suppose I can go back and watch this video in slow motion to see every little bit of that text, but I was, needless to say, anxious to actually try this thing out. It's a quick test with The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening just to make sure everything is hunky-dory here. Now, I do understand what people have said about the Pocket when they say that the cartridge slot is rather open. There's nothing holding it in place like there is on an original Game Boy, but I'm not too worried about that issue either. I don't think I'll accidentally nudge the cartridge while I'm playing. I've heard some people say it can happen. It doesn't feel like it's loose in there, but I mean, if you throw this thing around, it's probably going to malfunction whether or not the cartridge slips. So just treat it with the same care and respect you would any other premium or handheld device that you have. It's one thing that the original DMG Game Boy taught me when I was very little, because I used to have a tendency to throw my joystick when I would get frustrated. And once I had a Game Boy and realized that was not really replaceable, when I would get frustrated and I'd feel that temptation to throw a joystick, I'd be like, no, if this thing breaks, it's my own fault. And I would control my frustration. So, yeah, I learned a good lesson from having a Game Boy as a kid. Incidentally, I don't know why I used the word little, because I would have been a teenager when the Game Boy came out, but that's what happens when you get old. Time gets compressed and things seem farther away than they actually were. So let's just get a quick look at all of the options that come with the Pocket. I like Analogue's own palette here. I think Analogue GB looks really nice, but if that's not your bag, you can always switch it to DMG when you're running in Game Boy mode, and that'll give you the pea soup green, as they call it. Or if you had a Pocket and you didn't have the original DMG, you can replicate that color palette. If you have the light, if you grew up with a light because you lived in Japan, or you imported one like I did, you can recreate that glowing blue screen. And just for shits and giggles, I guess, there's one called Pinball Neon Matrix. Some people say that that looks like Virtual Boy. I suppose it does. I never had a Virtual Boy, but from the videos I've seen of a Virtual Boy, it definitely had that red on black look when you look through the lenses on either side. Now, if somebody could make a Virtual Boy core for the Analogue Pocket that would display those games on TV, I realize it wouldn't be the stereoscopic 3D, but it would be a nice way to play those games. And I have seen some people make Virtual Boy handhelds that are really clever and creative, but I wouldn't be able to cannibalize a Virtual Boy and do that myself. And I wouldn't want to anyway, because I know how hard to find and expensive they've become. You can shrink your picture all the way down to a size of, I don't know, a postage stamp if you really want to. But I would recommend leaving it in the full width and height when you're playing Game Boy games, which, as you can see, is 1600 by 1440, which is a 10:1 scale over the original Game Boy's 160 to 144 screen. And that is very much on purpose on Analogue's part, because they can display each individual pixel and recreate the original authentic Game Boy look down to pixel by pixel accuracy, just scaled up 10 times over. But if that's too big for you, then switch it to a smaller size. Get whatever scale you like. Now, when I clicked on the button to sync my Switch Pro controller, it found the dock immediately. I know that was professed to be one of the features of the dock, but it was still rather impressive to me when I hit the sync button and it just found it and it just worked. For the longest time, people have complained that the Game Boy player is difficult to find with the disc and useless without it unless you have customized your GameCube and done, I guess I would call it a jailbreak, but essentially you use a micro SD card in the memory card adapter and you have a Legend of Zelda save file that causes the GameCube to boot to the memory card. It's a hack. It's a workaround. And then you can use the Game Boy player without the GameCube's boot up disc. But how many people are going to go to that much trouble? They're either going to buy a Game Boy player with a disc, or they're probably not going to buy a Game Boy player at all. And that has actually become prohibitively expensive. Probably at this point, more so for the Game Boy player disc than actually buying an Analogue Pocket and a dock. I haven't checked the prices lately, but at one point they were pretty bad. Now, when you dock the Pocket, there will be some options that you have and some options that you don't. Like, you can't go and switch the handheld mode displays. You can't do like DMG and Pocket and Light, but you can still change it to the built-in color palettes that are there. You can select any of those. You can change how zoomed in the picture is. You can change whether or not you force it into original Game Boy mode or let it run on a Game Boy Color, which will cause it to have the color palettes that the Game Boy Color recognized by default when original Game Boy games were inserted. Or if they're color games, they will of course have their full Game Boy Color palette. And it should be noted that there is a core for each one of these things on the Pocket that emulates that hardware. And that's why field programmable gate arrays, or FPGA, are really important when you do this kind of thing, because it's not software emulation, it's the actual hardware recreating the circuitry in these original handhelds on a one-to-one basis. That's not 100% compatibility, which I know is sometimes used as brag for FPGA, like it's archive quality, they say. Well, that's bullshit. We all know there's going to be edge cases where something doesn't work in FPGA. But the nice thing about Analogue is that Kevtris is really committed to making these cores as close to 100% as he can. He is constantly working on things, testing out edge cases, trying to iron out the kinks in any core that he makes for any Analogue product. So if you're concerned about accuracy or quality, you're in good hands with Analogue, because it's going to be way higher than it will ever be with a software product. No offense to Hyperkin and their whatever they called their box that they plug into the TV and put Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games in, but that was not accurate. Even at the beginning and even after firmware updates, it was way off. So far with this, it's way right. I have yet to find the edge case that didn't work correctly, whereas with that Hyperkin Game Boy player thing, there was no edge cases. It was just regular games not working the way they were supposed to. I'm trying out some weird stuff here on my Everdrive GBA X5 just to see if the Pocket can handle it, and I am not encountering issues. The Sega Master System emulator that you can put on a GBA Everdrive, that obviously worked just fine because I was playing Fantasy Zone, so we know that works. And we've got NES games on here, which are not going to be super accurate when they're emulated through a Game Boy Advance, because the pixel ratios are not the same, the sound engine is not the same, so this is not comparable to playing actual NES games on an Analogue NT Mini Noir. But if you wanted to play NES games on a Game Boy, you probably wouldn't be playing them through the dock on an Analogue Pocket anyway. It's kind of a kludge. It's just there because it can be done, not even necessarily because it should be done. I feel like the Sega Master System version of emulator on Game Boy Advance is far better than the NES one, but your mileage may vary. Now here's something fun that a Game Boy player can't do that an Analogue Pocket through a dock can do: Game Boy Advance video. I haven't seen anybody else test this yet. I'm not saying I'm the first, but if they have, I haven't seen a video showing it. And yes, not compatible with Game Boy Player, but with an Analogue Pocket and a dock, it sure is. So get those Game Boy Advance video carts out and put them in your pocket, and you can actually watch them on a big screen TV. The Game Boy Player never let you do that. Never, ever, ever. It was not allowed. So I would say edge case is confirmed for me, or in other words, Analogue Pocket does what Nintendo don't. I'm going to try some of the Game Boy Advance and Game Boy accessories that I have later on, but I think for my first day with the Pocket, this is a pretty good overview of the things it can do. It can run original Game Boy games, it can run Game Boy Color games, it can run Game Boy Advance games, it can run Everdrives, it can run Game Boy Advance video carts. It can do anything. I am not disappointed with this product. It feels really nice in the hand when you play it in handheld mode. It works perfectly when you dock it in docked mode. And it's just like the Nintendo Switch. When you take it out of the dock, it transfers to the screen. When you put it in the dock, it transfers to the TV. They clearly knew what they were doing when they engineered this product, and I commend them for that. But I will say, in conclusion of this non-sponsored, self-funded review, that it wasn't cheap. It's $200 for a Pocket and $100 for a dock. Actually, let me correct that. It's $220 now, because the latest round of pre-orders, the price went up $20 due to the part shortage and the global situation. So it's not cheap. Getting an original Game Boy is going to be cheaper, but once you start modding it with backlight kits and IPS screens, it might end up costing the same or more as a Pocket and wouldn't be able to do all the things that a Pocket can do. And one of the things this dock can do is go to sleep and wake up with the power button on your Switch Pro controller. I didn't even realize that would work. I just tried it to see if it would work like the Switch, and it did. I'm impressed. I feel like my money was well spent. Hey folks, Mr. MegaManFan here. I've had some viewer requests since my Analogue Pocket review went live, and one of them was to test the Everdrive GB-X7, particularly Revision C, which is the one that I own, so that's a good coincidence, because apparently some people have issues with this working in their Analogue Pocket, so I'm going to try that and a few other things, some that you can already see in this picture and some that you can't. And I'm going to see what works and what doesn't, but let's start out with the Everdrive since that seems to be the one that's the most troublesome for folks. I saw other videos saying that Everdrives worked just fine, and the GBA X5 certainly worked when I tried it, so I don't think that's going to be an issue, but I guess there's one way to be certain. Let me get this white balanced a little bit. Play cartridge. OS loading. Yeah, it appears that it works just fine. Let's try a random Game Boy game here. Select and start. Yeah, okay, let's squeeze the cartridge. Save state. And let's squeeze it again. Load state. Yeah, seems to work fine. Back to menu. Yeah, I'm not seeing issues here. Let me try a Game Boy Color game. Go with Mega Man Extreme. Okay, let's try again with the squeeze. Save state. And load state. Guys, I'm not having any issues here. I think the only thing that the Everdrive can't do is go into sleep mode, because I believe you get a warning that says it will not go to sleep because the Everdrive is not supported. Let me just run it one more time. You will confirm that. Go back to a Game Boy game. Let's see, Adventure Island 2. Alright, I'll hit the sleep button over here on the side. Yeah, sleep mode is not supported by this cartridge. So, what issues are people having that the Everdrive isn't working for them. I'm not sure, but in my case, it seems to be fine. Let's try the Game Boy camera. I'm curious about this one as well. Probably going to be a little wonky since it's designed for an original Game Boy, or maybe a Game Boy Color. But maybe it'll just work right off the bat. Yeah? That is the most pixelated possible view of a game room. Let's turn the camera around facing the other way. And do the world's worst selfie. Almost no way this is going to come out with all the light reflecting. Well, I guess you can see me holding the camera, so that's something. Yeah, seems like the camera works. All right, let's get a little more esoteric here. Game Boy Advance accessories and peripherals, A and P. Let's dig into this. No, because I've already seen that you have to cut this thing up to make it fit with the pockets, so won't be doing that. Infrared transmitter. I don't know if I have a game fit because, once again, it's not the right size for this. So somebody's going to have to make an adapter for some of these accessories if they want to plug them into a pocket. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, the e-reader. Now that would be an interesting test. And I don't think I'll have to ruin any cables for that. Okay, let me get this thing out. So I think I'm going to need a second Game Boy linked to the pocket. Now, do I have the proper Game Boy to Game Boy cable here? No, that's a charger. All GameCube ones? Yeah. Surely I have one that's just system to system. Maybe this is it. With a rubber band that's falling apart. So from my testing, either this only works with the Analogue Pocket link cable that they sell themselves, or my link cable is bad, because I tried my very best to get it to communicate with Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario 3. I dug out the old original style Game Boy Advance that the e-reader fits in. I used the link cable that I had and connected it to the pocket. And unfortunately, it just wouldn't play ball. When I went into the area where you communicate from one Game Boy Advance to the other, it would say, unable to communicate, no matter what I did. And this made me think that possibly my e-reader was defective, but again, it has to be either the cable or it only supports the official analog cable, because I scanned in the cards for Clue Land and the game runs just fine. So it's not an issue with the e-reader. It is definitely an issue with the link cable not being supported, or you have to use the actual analog cable that they sell. Somehow I think it's probably the latter, but that's the limit of the testing that I'm able to do today. So we're 2 out of 3. The Everdrive GBX7 works fine, and Game Boy camera works just fine, but trying to do any sort of e-reader communication between a Game Boy Advance and the Pocket doesn't seem to be possible unless you use Analogue's own cable. But I could be wrong. Well, hey there folks, it's Mr. MegaManFan, and I feel like trying out some more things with the Analogue Pocket, so it's exactly what we're gonna do. Let's start out with Yoshi Topsy Turvy, a game with a motion sensor built into it, so this should be a good test case for Analogue Pocket being able to handle weird Game Boy Advance games, but we won't stop there. I'll try several others too. Fits in there just fine, of course, although some people may not like that fact that it tends to not be snug in there compared to a Game Boy Advance, but I mean, you take what you can get. At least you can play Game Boy Advance, and Game Boy Color all with this one device, right? Ooh, gotta adjust the white balance here. Press any button to continue. Choose the system that you're using. Alright, let's go ahead and calibrate this. Yes, I do want to calibrate it. Hold your advance at a slight angle. Well, we're going to consider it an advance for this purpose. Let me get a little more comfortable here. Hold it at a slight angle. That looks like he's standing straight. Call that straight. Yep. Well, I would say this works fine. How about we give Drill Dozer a shot? This one's got a rumble feature in it, so we'll see if it rumbles while I'm playing. At this point, I've got to say I'm not actually feeling any rumbling while I'm playing the Pocket, but I'm not sure if that's because the rumble motor is dead or if it's because my copy of the game just doesn't do that on an Analogue Pocket. But it's not rumbling. It's not a big deal to me because the game still works, but I will go back into the settings and make sure that I did turn it on because I'm pretty sure I selected rumble on, but I'll go look. So it's definitely not because I didn't have rumble on. So either that feature is just disabled by default when you're using a rumble cartridge in a Pocket, or it's just dead. The motor in it to make it rumble is dead. I'll try it on a Game Boy Advance later, but the game still works, so not totally disappointed by that. Let's try WarioWare Twisted, another gyroscope game. I'm gonna lose this at some point. Just the pain. Yeah, I couldn't take it anymore. Let's try Buktai, the sun in your hand, which has a solar sensor in it. I don't know how well that'll work in artificial light, but we'll find out. Error. Okay. Let's try that again. Oh, must not have had it inserted all the way. You probably can't tell what I'm doing at this point because of the camera angle, but the game tells you to put your hand over the solar sensor on the top of the cartridge, and when you have it completely covered, press the A button. That's the way it calibrates the light level while you're playing the game. Solar Boy seems to work. What else can we try? Let's see. Rockman EXE 4 or Rockman Battle Network 4, whichever one you want to call it. Yeah, this seems to work fine too. Classic NES series games, since they are known to give emulators trouble, so... yeah, that works fine too. Yep, everything works fine. Well, that's it for today's testing. Everything I tried, everything I threw at it worked fine, other than the rumble and drill dozer. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey Megamaniacs, Mr. MegaManFan here, and since Ryan brought it up in the comments the other day, I thought of one more thing we could try on the Analogue Pocket. This is Kirby Tilt and Tumble. So it has a motion sensor in it, just like WarioWare Twisted and just like Yoshi Topsy Turvy, only it's a Game Boy Color game. So let's give this one a shot in the old Analogue Pocket and see how it handles it. First we'll get my Everdrive out of there, GBA X5, which you saw in my very first Pocket video. Works just fine. I know some people have said they have issues with the GBX7, but I did a video testing that, and so far as I can tell, I'm not having any issues with it. But if you're having issues with it, I'm sorry. I can't replicate them on my end, so I apologize in advance for that, because if I can't recreate the error other people are having, how do I know they're having it? But I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying it's not happening to me for whatever reason. I don't know why. Okay, let's give Tilt and Tumble a rumble, a whirl, a shot, a try. Let's do something with it. Well, let's turn on the Pocket first. There we go. Sometimes you gotta hold that button in for a little bit longer than you would think. Hold your Game Boy flat, then press A. Well, this is gonna be hard to film, isn't it? Okay, let's see if I can get an angle here. Yeah, it seems to work fine to me. I'd say that's Kirby Tilt and Tumble confirmed. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. So you go to openFPGA. I've got the Game Boy and Game Boy Color BIOS loaded. which is gbc_bios.bin as noted. So I select Game Boy Color, I select Run, and let's pick a game that's in color. Let's go with Pokemon Pinball. As you can see, it took a few seconds to load it in, but not really that long. I wouldn't call that a huge, overwhelming delay that I was waiting a year and a day for it to be available. But as you can see, you can now run directly off your micro SD card. You don't have to have an Everdrive put in there. You don't have to have some sort of hacked using the, what do they call it? The developer tool for creating games. Because I know there was a workaround where you could rename your files and load them through the developer tool for programming. But this one, you don't even need to do that. You can just play it as is, and it works just fine. Let me give you another example here. I'll pause, I'll save, and go back to menu here, confirm quit, go back to openFPGA. This time I'll go to the Game Boy Core, run. I'll select Mr. Do, because that's always been one of my favorite Game Boy games. Of course, this is the GBC BIOS bin, so Game Boy games will be in some form of colorized appearance, like a 4-color palette, but it will be functionally the same as playing them on an original Game Boy, as you can see here. So this could be a huge space saver for some people who want to be able to just take a game library with them and not have to worry about packing a whole bunch of individual carts. You can just play backups. Or of course you can do other things as well, which Analogue is quick to point out in their frequently asked questions. They're like, we do not promote or support emulation. That's not what this is about. But are they going to stop people from using it this way? Well, how could they? They don't really have any control over what people do on their own time. They can say what it's for, but they can't say what you do with it once you do it. That's entirely up to you. So, bottom line here, download the latest firmware. Find the GitHub repository from Spiritualized 1997. It's been linked in many places, including on Kotaku.com. It's not hard to find. The BIOS you're going to have to find yourself, but once you do, you can run games directly off micro SD with no cart inserted. Mega Maniacs, this is Mist, a MegaManFan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You know all the things to do. Got some exciting news today about the Analogue Pocket. There are now even more cores thanks to Spiritualized 1997 on GitHub. We have a Game Gear core, a Sega Master System core, and an SG-1000 core. Now, the fact that all three of these got released at the same time shouldn't be much of a surprise, given that the SG-1000 is a pre-Master System console. In Japan, they called the Master System Mark III because it was the third revision of the SG-1000. And the Game Gear is essentially a Sega Master System in a portable form. Slightly different resolution and color palette, but games on Master System can be made to work on Game Gear and vice versa. So all three of these things are very directly related to each other. In fact, you really don't need the SG-1000 core if you don't want to take up the space, because if you rename .sg files to .sms, they will work on a Master System. But I'm going to suggest you keep it anyway if you want to play SG-1000 games, because I'm sure that Spiritualized, who may or may not be a person that goes by the name Kev, he's probably tweaked the SG-1000 core for the specific quirks of that console. So instead of playing SG games through the SMS core, you might just want to play them through the core therefore, and same with Game Gear and so on. But the bottom line is we have all new cores, and there's even a Neo Geo core out there, which I don't recommend because it's in beta and it's really wonky. Spiritualized didn't make it, and it uses a very specific Neo Geo ROM set that I don't have, and you have to source the BIOS files yourself. It's incredibly wonky. I couldn't get it to work. I gave up on that core. I think the Neo Geo core needs more development time before it's truly fleshed out and ready to go on the Analogue Pocket. But all of these cores from Spiritualized are ready out of the box, and you don't even need a BIOS file to run any of these. It's really simple to get them up and going, and in this video I'm going to show you how. The first thing you're going to want to do is take your micro SD out of your pocket, put it in an SD card adapter, and put that in your Mac or PC. Then you're going to want to go to github.com/spiritualized1997 and find his latest cores. He will always have the latest release available on the homepage. Just click on the links like I'm doing right here and download it to wherever you want on your PC or Mac. I just use the downloads folder for convenience here, but it doesn't really matter. Once you have that file, you're going to want to do the obvious thing and unzip it. I'm just cleaning up my desktop here before I do that. And now it's time to unzip the Game Gear core. Don't change any file names, just unzip it. That's all you need to do. Once you have that folder, you can get rid of the zip file. And now you're going to transfer everything in the zip file over to your Analogue Pocket. Go back to your micro SD card wherever it's located on your desktop and start with the assets folder. Go into the assets of the zip file. You see where it says GG. You're just going to drag that over to assets. You're going to do the same thing with every one of these folders. Cores, you're going to open that. You're going to find the core for the Game Gear inside. And once you do that, you're going to drag Spiritualized GG to the folder on your pockets. Tango says hello, by the way. You're going to drag that folder over to your Analogue Pocket. Oh my, he's excited. And you're going to do the same for platforms as well. Yes, Tango, we can hear you. In each case, just drag everything from the folder of the zip file over to your Analogue Pocket. And once you've done that, for all the images, all the cores, and all the assets, there's only one thing left to do. Supply your own backups of games. And those are going to go in the assets/common/ just whatever folder you want. Or you can just leave them in the common folder. But they always have to go in the assets for whatever console you prefer. I guess Tango really likes Analogue Pocket cores because he just jumped in the chair with me, and apparently he's going to nestle between my legs while I finish filming this. He's a good boy. Again, it's the same procedure as before. You unzip the file, you open it to reveal the contents, and you're going to drag all of this stuff over to your micro SD card. You're going to kind of get into a rhythm if you do this for all of the new cores, and it'll help because you'll remember this procedure when more cores are released by Spiritualized 1997 or anybody else in the future, because with openFPGA on the Analogue Pocket, it's wide open now that anybody can make cores for that second FPGA inside the pocket and use it to emulate on a hardware level through FPGA any classic game system. Who knows what we could end up seeing on the Pocket in the future? Sega Genesis, NES, Super Nintendo. I mean, the only limitations really are the number of buttons available on the Analog Pocket, so I'm sure that at some point there will be a system with too many buttons to properly play a game without some limitations. And obviously, the power limit will be exceeded once you get into stuff like Saturn and Dreamcast. You're probably not going to be able to do that with or without the buttons, just because the FPGA inside it would not be robust enough to handle things 32-bit and up, I would say. But who knows what's possible? Again, I'm not going to presume on behalf of any core developers that are out there. In fact, I would imagine that any core that Kevtris previously got running on either the Analogue Super NT, the Analogue Mega SG, or the NT Mini Noir is a possibility here. I won't just say 100% confirmed that this is going to happen, but if you saw a ColecoVision core, or what would be a good one for him to port right away that would be really popular? Atari 2600, ColecoVision, Intellivision, those all seem within the realm of possibility to come to a Pocket Core GitHub sometime in the future. I don't know for a fact that Spiritualized 1997, whoever that might be, is going to do that. I'm just speculating here. I certainly wouldn't be surprised at ColecoVision, given that one was on the Analogue Mega SG, and I wouldn't be surprised by 2600, since that's pretty easy to do as well. So give these cores a try on your Analog Pocket if you already have one, and if you don't, I'm really sorry, and I hope that you get one soon. The next step is to get the new core added. Now, to me, the easiest way to find this is to go to RetroRGB's site. Bob already has an article up about this new core, so if the link changes at any point, I'm sure he will update the article. So I'm just going to link you to Bob's article in the description, but the GitHub page is also shown here in the video. You're going to open this page and go down to the section that says Releases, Initial Release. Click on that. Then you're going to download the zip file. You see it right here. And once you've got it on your desktop, you're going to unzip that file, and you're going to move the contents from the zip file into your micro SD card. It's a very simple drag and drop process, copy and paste, cut and copy, whatever you want to call it. Just have two folders open each one. You're going to open assets on the micro SD card, drag the folder named SNES and the assets of the zip file to your micro SD card. Now go into the cores folder. You're going to do the same thing here. Open the cores folder in the zip file, and once you do that, drag the contents of the cores over to the cores on your micro SD card. Easy peasy. Got just a couple more files that you're going to need. Go into the platforms. This is where the graphics are loaded for your core. So drag the SNES graphic, go into images, do the same thing there with the SNES bin, and you're going to be all set. That's everything you need to get the Super Nintendo core up and running. You don't have to reformat anything. You don't have to upload a new firmware version. Just keep in mind, whatever games you want, they're going to go into a folder named Common. You see that with GBA there? It's going to be the same thing with Super Nintendo. Load your backups of your games into the folder labeled Common before you put it back into the micro SD slot of your Analog Pocket. Once you've done all that, you're good to go. You can play the backups of your games on demand. Now, since I'm Mr. MegaManFan, you already know that I own every single Mega Man game, so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop those, along with a special Mega Man 4 conversion to Super Nintendo that I previously featured on this channel. And I've also got the ROMs for some stuff that came with my Super Nintendo SD to SNES or FX Pack Pro, whatever you call it. It came with a set of ROMs that were licensed by Stone Age Gamer, so I dragged a couple of those files on here as well. And then I've got a full selection of things that I can play that are either licensed or that I own physically, and we can move on to the next step and show you what that actually looks like. And now that that's done, I've put the micro SD card back into the pocket. So we're going to go ahead and turn it on. And once we do, the SNES core should now be available under openFPGA. And there it is. So we will go ahead and select it and run it. And the list of games that you imported should be right there. Select the game. It will load it in. And there you have it. You can now play Super Nintendo games right on your analog pocket. If this thing wasn't already amazing before now, I think this might be the peak of making the analog pocket cool AF. I can't think of anything more useful or versatile than having this little device run directly off a micro SD card. Game Gear, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Sega Game Gear, and Super Nintendo. And frankly, we're only just scratching the surface of what this thing can do. So I've gone ahead and loaded up the cores, and now it's time to power on the pocket and see what happens. We go to openFPGA. Genesis is a selectable option now. Let's run it. And since I am Mr. MegaManFan, let's start with the Wily Wars. Other than that weird little bit of graphical error at the top, it seems to be working pretty well. For being in an alpha state, I would call it playable. The games itself aren't glitching. There may be a little bit of glitchiness at the top of the display, but the actual game is working just fine. And Tingo is reaching for me again. Yes, buddy. You don't have to be jealous. You're named after a cat from Mega Man. You are part of this legacy, buddy. Obviously, sound and graphics may not be perfect, but this sure looks good to me. Feel it let go of my finger there. And of course, some features are not going to be available in this early alpha build of the core. You're not going to have save states, you're not going to be able to sleep and wake, but if you just want to be able to play Genesis games on a pocket, you can certainly do that here. Yes, confirm. I want to try a different game. I know I'm Mr. MegaManFan, but gotta put this core to the test, so let's go with one of my all-time favorite games. Keep in mind, as far as I'm concerned, these are legal backups because I do own all of the games that I'm showing you. And it appears that Rocket Knight Adventures is one of the ones that just doesn't work on this core, which is okay. I knew that not everything would, but you would expect Sonic the Hedgehog to work. And again, with a little bit of graphical glitchiness at the top. And, oh, actually, it doesn't seem to be running. Now, wouldn't that be weird if the only thing that worked was Mega Man The Wily Wars? I mean, that would be sort of appropriate for the channel, but that would be hilarious if it was the case. Let's try it again. Sonic 2. Huh. Well, it's trying to do something, but we can't see it. It's there somewhere. Let's go back to Wily Wars and make sure that wasn't just a fluke the first time around that it worked. No? Well, I'll be damned. So far, the only thing I can actually get to work on this core is Wily Wars. How do you like that, Tango? What do you think about that? He's an adorable muffin. So yeah, it's going to be hit or miss with the core in this early state, but I would say experiment with it. Some games will work, some won't. Use your NTSC backups as opposed to PAL games, European games. Those probably won't work, so that's why I'm using the, as it's called, aftermarket version of Wily Wars that was licensed by Retrobit, which also has some speed and timing fixes, the one that I unboxed on this channel. And apparently those changes also make it more compatible with this core, at least compared to the other things that I tried. So, I guess what I'm really saying for this episode of Genesis Does is I want to know what kind of luck you have if you're using this alpha, which is 0.05. Let me know what kind of results you get, and if you're using something later than that that's probably more compatible, let me know as well. And if you got any of the things running that I didn't on this core, like Sonic, well, then give me that feedback as well. I welcome your comments. I'm on Twitter at Mr. MegaManFan, MrMegaManFan. And again, this core, if you have a Pocket, all you have to do is transfer all the folders to the micro SD card in your Pocket. GitHub.com/Eric Lewis. But I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Tango. We both say thank you for watching, and I will see you again in a future video.